Imagine you are a woman living 30,000 years ago. Night has fallen. Outside the shelter, the wind moves through the trees. Somewhere in the darkness, a dry branch snaps. Farther away, you hear a sound you cannot quite identify whether it comes from a wolf, a hyena, or some other predator. But tonight, the animals outside are not what frighten you most, because your body has just gone into labor. No hospital, no doctor, no painkillers, no operating room if something goes wrong, no ambulance, and no way to know for certain that when the sun rises, both you and your baby will still be alive. Today, childbirth can still become complicated even when a mother is surrounded by doctors, medicine, and modern technology. And yet our ancestors gave birth for hundreds of thousands of years before any of those things existed. So how did they do it? Did a prehistoric woman really walk into a dark corner of a cave and give birth entirely on her own? Or were there other people beside her, an older mother, a sister, a friend, or perhaps a woman who had witnessed enough births to know what to do, because there is something very unusual about our species. Human childbirth is exceptionally difficult. And to understand how our ancestors managed to survive it, we have to begin with our own bodies. Why is human childbirth so difficult? Look at a newborn horse. Within just a few hours of being born, it can already stand on its own legs. But human newborns are completely different. A newborn human cannot run, cannot find food on its own, cannot defend itself. It even needs someone else to support its head. And the problem begins before the baby is even born. Over the course of evolution, our ancestors adapted to walking on two legs. The pelvis had to meet the demands of a body that stood upright and moved on 2 feet. At the same time, the human lineage also evolved increasingly large brains. And eventually these two evolutionary stories came together: a birth canal with a complex shape and a baby with a relatively large head. In a typical birth, the baby does not simply slide through a straight tube. It has to change direction as it moves through the pelvis. The head and shoulders must pass through spaces with different shapes. That process can require complex rotational movements, and this creates a very practical problem. Return now to 30,000 years ago. The woman is in labor. Her contractions are growing stronger. She is exhausted. Her ability to move is becoming limited. She cannot clearly see everything that is happening. And at that moment, another pair of hands could become incredibly useful. Someone to keep her steady, someone to watch, someone to receive the baby, someone who has seen this happen before. We cannot travel back in time to directly observe a Paleolithic birth. But the complexity of human childbirth, combined with anthropological observations of many human societies, suggests an important possibility. Childbirth may have been a social activity for a very long time. Who helped the mother look around the shelter? Near the fire, there may be an older woman. She has given birth herself. She has watched others give birth. Perhaps she has witnessed successful births and births that ended in loss. Beside her might be sisters, relatives, or other members of the group. No one has a medical degree. No one understands hormones. No one knows that bacteria exist. But that does not mean they know nothing. Because in a world without books, experience is the library. If something once helped a mother, it could be remembered. If a particular position seemed to work, it could be used again. If a certain sign often appeared before a dangerous birth, an experienced person might gradually learn to recognize it. A young girl might watch her mother help another woman give birth. Years later, when it is her turn to help, she carries with her what she once witnessed. That is how knowledge can travel beyond a single lifetime. Not through writing, but through observation, memory, and transmission. Perhaps the midwife did not begin as a profession. There was no title, no certificate. Perhaps it began simply as one woman helping another woman give birth. But assisting with childbirth was not only about receiving the baby. Someone could tend the fire. Someone could fetch water. Someone could care for the older children. Someone could keep watch. Someone could bring food. Because during labor, the mother becomes especially vulnerable. And in the prehistoric world, being unable to move could become a matter of survival. Where did they give birth? There was no single prehistoric delivery room. Our ancestors lived everywhere, from tropical regions to bitterly cold environments. They used caves, rock shelters, and many other forms of shelter depending on the period and the region. So we cannot say that all ancient women gave birth inside caves. but we can think about their basic needs: a relatively safe place, some protection from the weather, close to other people, access to water, and in cold climates, close to a source of heat. Because immediately after birth, the baby faces a major problem: heat loss. Its tiny body has just emerged from the warm environment inside its mother. Its skin is still wet. The air outside is colder. There is no temperature-controlled room, no modern crib. Our ancestors had to use whatever they had: soft materials, animal hides in communities that used them, shelter, fire, and most importantly, the human body. Keeping the baby close to the mother provides direct warmth. Prehistoric people did not need to understand the term thermoregulation. They only needed to observe that babies kept warm were more likely to survive. But fire did something else as well. It provided light. And in a world with predators, a woman in labor could not simply get up and run. That does not mean wild animals surrounded every birth. But danger does not have to appear every night to influence behavior. A group of people with fire weapons and several alert adults would be safer than a completely isolated mother. What position did prehistoric women give birth in? When many people today think about childbirth, they picture a woman lying on a bed. But that is not the only position humans can use to give birth. Across many cultures, women have given birth while squatting, kneeling, sitting, or using other upright positions. So there is no reason to assume that prehistoric women always gave birth lying on their backs. A woman might kneel, lean against another person, squat, change positions as labor progressed, walk while she was still able to, stop when a contraction came. She could make use of whatever was around her: the ground, something to hold on to, an animal hide, or simply the body of another person. We do not know of one single position used by every community. And that is exactly the point. There was no single prehistoric way of giving birth. There were thousands of generations of humans living across countless environments and cultures. But eventually, one way or another, the baby was born. And just when everyone might have thought the danger was over, a new stage began. The first hours, the baby had to breathe. It had to be kept warm. It had to be fed. Meanwhile, the mother was still at risk of blood loss and still had to pass through the final stage of childbirth. And then there was the umbilical cord. We do not know exactly how Paleolithic Homo sapiens dealt with the umbilical cord. Different communities may have used different methods. But prehistoric people possessed stone tools with extremely sharp edges, along with many other materials that could be used in daily life. However, the umbilical cord was handled. The more urgent questions were still: is the baby breathing? Is the mother all right? Are they both being kept warm? Then came food. Breast milk provided an appropriate source of nutrition during the earliest stage of life, but this created another challenge. The mother who had just given birth needed time to recover. She still needed to eat, drink, rest, while the baby needed to nurse and receive frequent care. If the mother had to do everything alone, the energetic cost would be enormous. But if someone else brought food back, someone fetched water, someone cared for the older children, everything changed. And this is where the story of childbirth becomes a story about cooperation. But what if there were complications? This is the part we should not romanticize. Imagine that the woman has been in labor for many hours. She is exhausted, but the baby still has not come. The people around her know that something is wrong. They have experience. But experience has limits. No blood transfusions, no antibiotics, no safe cesarean section by modern medical standards. If severe hemorrhaging occurred, if the birth canal became obstructed, if there were complications involving the placenta, or if an infection developed, there might be almost nothing they could do. Sometimes the mother died, sometimes the baby died. Sometimes both of them did. We cannot assign a single mortality rate to all prehistoric women. Populations, environments, diseases, and living conditions varied too greatly. But pregnancy and childbirth have always carried real biological risks. What is remarkable is not that our ancestors eliminated those dangers. They did not. It is that they may have been able to reduce some of those risks through experience and support. A woman who had witnessed many births might learn to recognize patterns. She might know when labor was taking unusually long, know when the mother needed to rest, know that even after the baby was born, the danger was not necessarily over. That knowledge was imperfect. But in a world without books, the experienced person was where knowledge was stored. What if the mother could not care for her baby? Suppose the baby survived, but the mother could no longer care for it. A newborn could not eat the same food as an adult. It depended heavily on milk. So did that mean the baby would inevitably die? Not always. In a community where other women were breastfeeding, there was biologically the possibility that another woman could nurse the baby. When people other than the biological parents directly participate in caring for a child, this is known as alloparenting. A grandmother, a sister, a brother, a relative, other members of the community. In humans, this kind of support is especially important because children remain dependent on adults for an extraordinarily long time. This is also connected to the concept of cooperative breeding, raising children through cooperation. One person brings food, another carries the baby, another looks after the other children, another passes on experience. No one has to do everything. And here, one particularly fascinating figure appears, the grandmother. The grandmother hypothesis proposes that older women may contribute to the success of their descendants through food care and knowledge. The hypothesis is still being studied and debated, but it reminds us of something important. In human societies, an individual's value does not necessarily end when they can no longer reproduce. An older woman can be an entire storehouse of memory. She knows where to find food. She knows how to care for children. She knows what happened during previous births. And perhaps, one day, she herself stands beside her daughter as the next generation enters the world. Perhaps weakness was the key all along. Look at the baby once again. It is weak, helpless, energy-demanding, and it requires care for years. At first glance, this seems like a terrible survival strategy, but a long childhood also provides an enormous advantage: time to learn. A child born 30,000 years ago did not automatically know which plants were safe to eat. It did not know how to shape stone. It did not know which tracks belonged to prey. It did not know where to find water during the dry season. It did not know the rules of the group. It had to learn from its mother, from its father, from its grandparents, from its siblings, from the people around it. A large part of human brain development continues after birth. That makes us dependent, but at the same time, it makes us extraordinarily adaptable. A child can learn the language of its community, how to find food in its particular environment, how to make tools, how to cooperate, how to care for others, and eventually, how to care for the next generation. In this way, every generation does not have to start again from the beginning. Knowledge accumulates. One person observes, another remembers. The young learn it again. And culture begins to function like a form of memory that exists outside the body. Now, return to the night where our story began. The fire has burned low. The distant sky is beginning to brighten. The mother is still exhausted, but the baby is lying close against her body. It has survived its first few hours. Nearby, there may be an older woman. Someone else brings water. Someone prepares food. Someone tends the fire. None of them know that they are participating in an evolutionary strategy. They are simply doing something profoundly human, taking care of one another, and perhaps that is what we often overlook when we imagine prehistoric life. We like to think about spears, fire, hunting mammoths, predators, but part of human history may have been shaped by actions that could never become fossils. Someone bringing food to a recovering mother, someone holding a baby, someone keeping the fire alive through the night, an experienced woman holding the hand of a younger woman in labor. Those actions left behind no stone tools for archaeologists to uncover, but they may have helped keep entire generations alive. So how did ancient women give birth in the wild? Not through some secret technique, not because they did not feel pain, not because prehistoric childbirth was somehow easier. They gave birth in a world filled with danger, and sometimes they did not survive. But when things went better, perhaps part of the reason was that the mother was not always alone. Humans have never been especially powerful creatures when standing alone. We do not have claws. We do not have enormous fangs. Our newborns are almost completely helpless. But when one person becomes most vulnerable, others can move closer. Perhaps that is one of humanity's oldest survival technologies. Not made of stone, not made of bone, not made of wood, but made of other human beings. And if you are watching this video today, then somewhere along your ancestral line, generation after generation, there were mothers who successfully gave birth often enough for that chain to remain unbroken, till eventually it led to you. So the next time you imagine a baby being born beside a fire tens of thousands of years ago, do not look only at the mother. Look at the people standing around her, because perhaps it is there that we can see one of the things that has helped humanity survive for so long, our ability to care for one another. If you enjoy stories that explore what life was really like for our human ancestors, hit like, subscribe to History in Sticks, and leave a comment. If you had been born 30,000 years ago, what do you think would have been the most dangerous challenge during your first year of life? Because being born was only the first challenge. Surviving long enough to grow up was an entirely different story.